Okay, hi everyone. Good evening. I'm very pleased to be here to talk a bit about post-quantum cryptography and how it can be used with existing network infrastructures to get this pesky quantum computers and their threat to our cybersecurity under control. So I work as a SSH fellow at SSH Communications Security, so a disclaimer that that's what I've been doing for the past 20 years. They're in various different positions, working with large organizations around the world. And this post-quantum stuff has been something that we as a company have started investing heavily in 2019, and before that, we have done some research stuff on it, but we're, as a company, known obviously for Secure Shell, as the name implies. So our founder, Tatu Ylönen, invented Secure Shell protocol, but we have contributed quite a lot to other IPsec and PKI standards as well. The post-quantum cryptography is essentially just quantum-safe cryptography. There's nothing special about it from that point of view. It doesn't do anything magic in any way. It is just mathematics trying to come up with a hard problem for the quantum computers to solve that we can use in cryptography. And there's two distinct problems that need to be fixed with public key cryptography in particular. There's the key exchange side of things, so we need to protect the session keys, and that is the problem that is the most pressing right now. And then at some point we need to figure out also something for the signature algorithms, so they're needed next. But for now, we need to focus on the key exchange side of things. Now, you might ask, why post-quantum cryptography and nothing else? Well, it's something that's compatible with our current networks and our proven network communication protocols like TLS, IPsec, and Secure Shell. So it doesn't require anything special hardware for this. And it's kind of important, like we just don't have the resources, like on a global internet scale, to blanket the whole Earth with optic fibers to get the blind fibers in that would be required for something like quantum key distribution. And also, like the real-life use cases for those new technologies are kind of limited also from the point of view that they come with kind of a built-in man in the middle, so the attacker in the middle in those solutions. Or something that, unless you're able to do a laser beam to a satellite or a line of sight signal base, you still need some sort of jump from those two devices like mobile phones or laptops. So personally, at least, I'm not willing to go back to the world where I would have to use a telephone with the optic fiber cord plugged into it. And I don't want to be doing this line of sight stuff with my phone either, so that is one. And then even if in this ideal situation, if you have like a very small geographic area, less than 100 kilometers, where you could potentially, if you had all the money in the world to throw into these new gadgets and new optic fibers, it would still leave the very crucial point, which would be the end-to-end security. So post-quantum cryptography is able to provide that. Other solutions that I tackle that session key protection might not. So they would end up, the fiber cord would end up at that server room, or in like a best case scenario into some sort of device right beside your workstation. And what is our nemesis in this presentation is really that little pesky quantum computer chip thingy. So that's IQM's baby picture of a superconducting quantum computer chip, and I believe that's the 12-qubit one. So it is no way right now threatening to our existing cryptography at this baby stage, but IBM has kept up with their promise of delivering more powerful quantum computers. They're on track on their Osprey is over 400 qubits right now. And IQM, that's the Finnish small startup that does on-premise quantum computers, they have also promised to deliver larger computers every year after year or so. We're getting there when, while we're not there yet. So now, all these kind of questions, like how much time do we have? There's kind of a moot point in the sense that we don't really have that much time to prepare anymore. The ship has sailed for many of these things already. When you think about that, the harvest attackers, they know this thing that this is their window of opportunity to record right now the data that's going in transit, and then just sit on it, and they can do it because it's cheap to store data in large quantities. It's getting cheaper every year. And it's just something that you can then decrypt later. So the attack on this key exchange is retrospective. So we should have done something about it already a while ago. And then if you're wondering, does this really affect me in any way, or like yourselves, like the wholehearted answer is that yes, it affects everything. Like I'm talking mostly about the network communication protocols and stuff, but anything that uses public key cryptography. It might not call itself public key cryptography, but rest assured it's used in every single laptop, mobile device. Doesn't matter if you just spun up some sort of cloud server somewhere. It's vulnerable all the way to the ancient mainframes that are still used heavily today in the large organizations. Now, this NIST project of selecting the new algorithms, the PQC algorithms, to replace our existing cryptography, that started already years ago, but last year was a pivotal moment when, in July, they chose the preferred algorithms that will be standardized. And then, if you looked at these presentations that, for instance, the American Homeland Security and CISA and NIST came out just a few years ago, so in 2021, when they projected that, okay, we have this decade to get this thing sorted out, that by 2030, we should have these algorithms in place. That kind of timeline has shrunk all the time. So the Cybersecurity Preparedness Act that passed the US Congress last year already mandates now that this spring, all the US government agencies have to have some sort of plan in place how they're going to do this migration to post-quantum cryptography. And the 2024 is for many of these things as the pivotal moment when we should have the finalized standards, when certain organizations are expected to be fully migrating to the post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. Now, how bad is this situation? So we see the clouds forming. We kind of know that we have to prepare for this quantum typhoon. But just like with these real-life tropical storms, it's very difficult to predict exactly when and where this quantum typhoon will hit. We know what the conditions have to be met in order this to happen, but it's like weather forecasting, very tricky. So we do know how this will proceed. It will be that public key cryptography will be the first casualty of this. The key exchange part needs to be fortified already now. Then the authentication keys and certificates will follow. And then there is this thing where it is not in the best interest of some of the actors in this world to tell us when they have reached that capabilities. I have colleagues who believe that we will know when this has happened, when some of the Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies will start showing interesting traits, and they get broken. But then there are others who believe that it's the actors in this world who have both the resources from the money perspective and otherwise, that they would just keep it to themselves. Like back in the olden days when Enigma was broken, the Ally did not let everyone know that they let their own ship sink to protect the secret that they had already broken the Enigma encryption machine. So it is likely that these weather conditions change fast. We had that little scare a few months ago when the Chinese research came out saying that RSA 2048 was broken. And well, that turned out to be not quite the case, but when that happens, we don't want to be caught in the storm. Now, this is just in no way in scale or anything. It's just to give an idea how this thing progresses from the classical threat to this quantum threat. So we had it easy back in the day when RSA was pretty much the only algorithm we needed to worry about. And whenever things got hairy with it, we could just double the key size and we were good to go for some time. So it's a bit like you would be wearing ankle-high boots. And before the water level rose, you would switch to knee-high boots. And now we're at the stage where we're wearing these kind of fishing pants, very uncomfortable, not nice at all, very unpractical. But that's what we are stuck with right now. But then at the end of the day, all of these algorithms, Diffie-Hellman, elliptic curve key Diffie-Hellman, RSA, ECDSA, and well, DSA shouldn't be used in any case these days, but all of these have to be replaced. The quantum safe key exchange stuff, so in the middle, that has the retroactive situation going on there. So we need to act before the cryptographically relevant quantum computers are available, and then that's kind of the last date when we have to switch from the old authentication keys to the quantum safe ones. The only silver lining in all this is that AES, that's the symmetric encryption algorithm, is believed to be safe long into the 128-bit versions, and especially 256-bit. AES is believed to be safe until foreseeable future. But it might be that, at some point in that quantum fancy world, we need to figure out something with those as well. Now, the industry has taken largely this hybrid key exchange approach. And why do we want to do this at SSH, and why others have done it, like Cloudflare, when they came out last year with their TLS 1.3 version, having support for PQC algorithm, the Crystal Skyper, and the elliptic curve key Diffie-Hellman combined. We have come to this conclusion from the point of view that those PQC algorithms are quite new. So they haven't gone through that sort of mathematical scrutiny like our classical counterparts. There just hasn't simply been enough time to do that. So we are a bit iffy about them. So we rather combine the classical algorithm and the PQC algorithm so that you get the best of the both worlds. So if there's something wrong with either of the algorithms, there's still the other one. And it's going to be at least as hard to break as either one of them alone, most likely a bit more difficult because they're combined. And then from the point of view, like for SSH, when we deal with customers all around the world who have different kinds of compliance requirements, and these are the largest organizations that have very strict things, that last point, which probably, I'm not sure if it's even visible for all of you, but compliance while the standardization is going can be achieved when you do this combination, which wouldn't be, because if you would just go with the PQC algorithms alone, while they're being standardized, they wouldn't be compliant. Now, you could there's no reason why it has to be elliptic curve key Diffie-Hellman. You could combine several PQC algorithms, or you could combine the classical Diffie-Hellman. The classical Diffie-Hellman is just slow, so it's not kind of recommended for that point of view. But more on that on the next slide. So the previous one looked quite nice. We just do the hybrid key exchange. So why the heck do we have like this whole list of all these different PQC algorithms? So in real life, what ends up happening is that even though NIST is going with Crystal Skyber, and we have combined that with the NIST curve that matches the level 5 security parameters, so that is like the 256-bit security level that it aims. It's not what all the world is looking at. So Germany has chosen in their BCI, they recommend FrodoChem. The French followed suit. So that we have combined then with the Edwards curve Diffie-Hellman. And then OpenSSH has taken a slightly different approach. They've gone with the streamlined n-true prime. And that's combined also with Edwards curve. And then in our Tectia Quantum Safe edition, we also support FireSaber, and that's retained for backwards compatibility because we had to come out with this version before NIST had made their round 3 selection. So we made an educated guess that they're going to choose either Crystal, Skyber, or Saber and implemented them both for that. But then nowadays, in the latest versions, we don't, by default, support Saber because it's not really recommended by anyone at this point anymore. So that's how the secure shell side of things is with the commercial Tectia, and OpenSSH supports just the streamlined n-true prime. Then with IPsec, the Internet Key Exchange in that is furthest along in IETF of becoming standardized, like this method, the framework, how you can combine these classical Diffie-Hellman or the PQC algorithm. So it's not so much about specifying which PQC algorithms to use, it's just the framework, how you're able to do that. So what that allows in the IPsec world is to get into this situation where if you need to have Americans communicating with the Germans and everybody wants to be compliant within their own jurisdiction, we can have, for instance, elliptic key Diffie-Hellman combined with Crystal, Skyber, and FrodoChem. Now, all of these are lattice-based algorithms. There's some differences on the underlying mathematics, like what kind of learning with errors these are. So the FrodoChem is kind of stands apart from the pack because it's a more conservative choice. It's not structured lattice, but because they're all lattice-based algorithms, there's still that sort of inherent thing that if there's any issue with the lattices, with the quantum computers that gets discovered at some point, it most likely will affect all of these. So the NIST is still looking in this round 4 that is ongoing until 2024. These algorithms that would be based on some other mathematical problem than the learning with errors on lattices. And this is just the key exchange side of things. So then what we then need to worry about at some point is these quantum safe authentication keys. For online use, the Crystal's dilithium, that's the NIST primary candidate that was selected last summer, it's fine. In most cases, Falcon is usable if you need something that has smaller signatures than dilithium. But then I have this question mark here, because unprecedentedly, NIST opened up the competition midway for new submissions. So by June 2023, so this year, we should have more candidates, and ideally something that is not lattice-based, because I'm sure many of you read about what happened to Rainbow a year ago, and many of the other candidates that they just did not survive, not even our measly old laptop. So we need ideally something that would be based on some other mathematical hard problem. Now, what can you then do with these, like the bedrock of these protocols? So with Secure Shell and with IPsec, you can make any connection quantum safe. So you can do the various tunneling features that exist in our TechD or in OpenSSH, just port forwarding. So essentially, you take any TCP connection and you tunnel it through secure shell connection, so you're able to get almost end-to-end, so node-to-node security with that. And then this is kind of important part of it, that you have to be, with OpenSSH, it has to be the version 9.0, which is not available right now everywhere, but where it is, like for instance, on the latest versions of Mac OS, it uses already OpenSSH 9.0, so that's kind of an easy thing. But there's a whole bunch of infrastructure out there that is not the latest and greatest. So there you have to start thinking, how are you going to be able to do this on those platforms? And then if you need something that is like entire network, then so you need your UDP connections. You don't necessarily even care what's in the network. You just want everything to be quantum safe. Then you could go with the network level encryptor. That's like from us, we have NQX for that, and it's IPsec-based solution. Now, I think I skipped something. Yes, the quantum safe journey. So these very first steps are something that probably has already happened. Even if you haven't thought about quantum safe itself, you have probably figured out where the valuable assets are. And now when you put the quantum safe journey glasses on, you start looking at your assets, then you need to look at like what the data that is in transit, how it's protected currently. So pretty much any protocol that has the plaintext version and the S version, you know that you have to tackle that. And the prioritization plan, when everything has to be updated, it then comes down to how do you choose what to update first. And many of these migration plans, they have that how long the data needs to be kept secret as the last bullet point. But I think you should start with that, because that informs you where your pain points are and what really would make sense. So if you have extremely sensitive, confidential data that will be public in a few months' time, you don't really need to worry about that at this stage. But if it's data that has a long validity period from that point of view, that it's sensitive going, that we talk about years, then you have to start protecting those. So I would love if, like personally, if the medical industry, if the healthcare industry was deleting this thing, because they have the most sensitive data. Like yesterday's keynote speech was about the Vastaamo case. So that data will never expire. It should be indefinitely kept a secret. But our world doesn't function, unfortunately, that way. So mostly what we see in our customer base, it's the financial industry. They have been regulated for such a long time that they have good incentives to do so. They have this costly compliance failure model where if they lose their primary account numbers of their customers, it's existential crisis for banks. It's also the compliance violation fines are astronomical, so they have a very good incentive to get this thing going already now. And then something, if you've ever been involved in any of these SHA-1 to SHA-2 transitions, for instance, that have started already eons ago and have dragged on and on, you know that you have these great plans how it's going to go, and then at the end of the day, you're not going to meet the deadlines, and there's still stuff running out there that is using SHA-1 that is not supposed to, and so forth. So I'm kind of telling you the bad news here. We have this long tail with that SHA-1 to SHA-2 transition. This would have to happen quicker. Like, you cannot dilly-dally with this transition as we have been doing with the SHA-1 to SHA-2 transition. And the fine print, when you start looking at your applications that use, for instance, TLS, the difficult part is that even though like vendors like Cloudflare, for instance, when they have put that out there that they're going to support the Crystal Skyper with ECDH out of the box, it applies only to TLS 1.3. So you have to start planning how do you get all your TLS 1.2 applications upgraded to 1.3 to be able to benefit from this. And if you cannot deal with all the embedded TLS and the legacy systems that are about to be decommissioned because you've decided to go to cloud or whatever reason come back from the cloud to on-premise when you figure out that not all things are sunny and great over there. It's a great thing to start planning at least some sort of temporary quantum-safe solution to tackle that. And then chances are that you're going to be using that for a long time to come, but at least plan for it. And then when we get that news that RSA has been broken, then you better have prepared some sort of emergency plan, how you're going to go into production if it has to happen faster than what you anticipated in the first place. Now, our company deals mostly with encryption software, so we provide that kind of tools, but we do also do some professional services in terms of risk management. So for secure shell estate sort of things, we're able to do stuff. And if you're more like, I'm sure most of you here are more like, let me do it myself, we have also Sherlock tool that you can download for free and use in your own environment to figure out your post-quantum resiliency situation, as well as other essential information about the secure shell estate. Now, when you have done your fancy plans on how you're going to go, the good news about this securing the key exchange when it comes to the secure shell side of it is that it's just a simple software upgrade. Everything happens kind of under the hood. There's very little things that can go wrong and can break. So there's really no reason to delay, because all these hybrid systems also support the classical keys. So you can, if you want, enforce the PQC already now, in which case if you try some older clients that don't support any of the server algorithms listed here, that they would fail to connect. But when you have newer stuff like OpenSSH 9.0, it would select the Streamline Entry Prime, and our privilege access management PrivX would choose Crystal Skyper, Astectia, and a few other of our solutions. And then you're able, from your logs, you're able to see what's the situation also in your environment. So if you don't need the full-blown stuff and you're dealing with just few, you're good with just figuring out just from the logs where you are along the transition, at what point are you able to switch to that PQC-only configuration. And then when you kind of dealt with the key exchange side of this, then from the quantum safe journey perspective, the next step is monitoring the current authentication keys. Now, this might be something that you have already done for the past 10 years, because you have compliance requirements to get the key inventory, and all the keys need to meet the current standards and so forth. The entitlement management, it helps if you use some sort of privilege access management or other things where you're able to kind of have a clear picture what the credentials that are used in the environment are and who are using them. And then my 2 cents here is that please exceed the minimum standards if you have to still create existing RSA keys or elliptic curve keys. So you don't want to be the easy target going forward with the smallest key sizes. But know that it will not save you in the long run, but in the short term, at least it will make it a bit more difficult for the attackers. Now, this step is going to be the painful step, because even though on paper it looks pretty much the same, you update the software again, all that, but unfortunately, this requires a whole lot of more industry effort to get this step going. So all the CAs, so certification authorities, everything needs to be updated. And there's also this unfortunate thing with these authentication keys that need to be replaced in public key cryptography, that ideally they should be able to stand on their own merits. So there is no easy hybrid solutions when it comes to the authentication keys. They would become very cumbersome for users or machines to use if we need to require first, for instance, long enough RSA key, and then you have to authenticate also with some PQC, like the lithium key, at the same time to gain access. But you will probably end up seeing these environments where you have this mixed environment. So you still have the old keys in place used in some place. You start to use new PQC keys in some assets. And it might be at that point that if you have gone through the zero trust approach with the authentication keys, so you do not have any more these long-standing keys like SSH keys or the AWS API keys that would be persistent. So if you have gone already to just-in-time keys that are generated and kind of disappear automatically after 15 minutes or 8 hours or something, you're kind of in a better position at this transition phase when you don't have to deal with the entire environment and all of those persisting keys. You have a kind of a you can sleep better at night when knowing that even if somebody steals your current ephemeral authentication key, it's not going to be usable anymore, after today or whatever the timeline for that is. And then when we eventually get to this post-quantum world, it's good to know that the sufficiently long classical keys are good until the day one. So that's the point when you have to disable them last. And as I mentioned, the AES is kind of good until on future, unless new attack vectors are found on those. And then that's kind of also the last ditch place where you really have to let go of all the old key exchange algorithms as well. But ideally, the last bit that you have chosen one of the hybrid PQC algorithms to be used in the environment, it should have happened already now because, you don't want to be the one who then tries to explain to somebody how did this recording attack happen and why are your sensitive information out there years after the fact when it was captured. So if you have any questions, I think there are people with microphones who can run around and catch them, or if you need to digest this a little bit more, you can always go to see the resources at our www.ssh.com Academy site.
Maybe one question. So I was taking some notes from your presentation, and this plan of action for migrating, you mentioned data that needs to be protected for many years to come, like medical data. Isn't it that this is anyways data at rest, like on hard disks or some databases in the cloud, which is mostly protected with symmetric keys anyways, and as you mentioned in your talk, symmetric AES is not vulnerable when quantum computers become available. So I don't really need to worry about my medical data because it's protected with AES.
When it's at rest, often that's the case in ideal situation. But then this is like data in transit, so that medical data still gets whooshed around over the internet, and that's where you would really ideally like to see the PQC algorithms being deployed already now.
Sure. The other question was about this embedded TLS, where upgrades are hard. There was not really so much mention of what kind of key sizes and message sizes are we talking about when we have this post-quantum stuff. Like, I would think like embedded TLS is anyways restricted by how much key and message sizes it can handle. So if like I'm trying to migrate some small sensor device to post-quantum, is it the right target to migrate, or is there maybe better things that I should plan for migrating? And maybe my final question was, in your presentation, there was mention about key exchanges and certificates and signatures used in certificates. Should I care about software updates if my like software packages are signed and there is like this whole secure boot process and bootloaders and
Yes, definitely you should care about your code signing. But for those, like for instance, the CNSA 2.0 that is, I think it was published, the final draft for it last September, it does not actually recommend the PQC algorithms because they don't see that they would be available in a timely manner. So it has some old algorithms that are considered to be quantum resilient enough to be used. And I think the deadline for those to be put into place, at least for the governmental agencies in the US, is 2024. So yes, you should definitely worry about also that side of things. I just talked mostly about the communication protocols in this presentation. But check out the CNSA 2.0 for those. And you did ask something in the middle, which I already, so about the embedded stuff. Yeah, so yeah, obviously that is a tricky thing. Like, so it was actually on the NIST last kind of a workshop, I guess I could call it. It was called upon that, you know, please, when they are trying to figure out like what sort of submissions to get in June for these authentication keys, the signature algorithms, they were actually calling out for some stuff that would have very small signatures or something that would be mostly, and to try to describe the use cases where we should try to find the alternative that would kind of replace the question marks there. Because Falcon, even though with smaller signature sizes, it's not ideal in all applications. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, everyone.